Anyway, the other major point to look at is that of the Islamic code, law code, which requires the cutting off of a person's head for certain crimes, cutting off of hands, stoning to death, etc. What's happening with the lighting? You wouldn't work it out? You need to turn it on. In the West, the attitude towards penology, towards putting people in jail and punishing them, etc., has changed over the years. In the beginning, they looked at jailing and punishment as serving three basic purposes. One, retribution. That's punishment for what you've done. Two, deterrence, discouraging others from doing it, or yourself. And three, to reform you as a means of reformation, to reform the individual. However, as time passed, the position regarding retribution and deterrence changed. The leading jurists in the US and the UK, etc., they concluded that the main goal of imprisonment should be one of reformation and not retribution, because retribution is cruel. Person is already dead. For you to go and kill this other person is not going to bring them back. So it is cruel and unjust punishment. That's what they called it. Of course, the consequence of that is that more people committed crimes. The rate of murder, etc., has been constantly increasing. And societies which continue to maintain the death penalty, these are looked down upon. Though in America, when it was abolished back in the 60s, 50s and 60s across America, by the 70s, late 70s, they were bringing it back again. So most states in the US today do have the death penalty, though at one time it had been abolished across the board. So they realized that it was not serving a useful purpose to abolish it. In fact, what happened in the case of the jails is that people were not being reformed. People committed murder, they went into jail, they came out and committed more murders. That was the reality. So in the Islamic context, that individual who commits murder is executed. The society is protected from his evil. As Allah had said, that in taking of that life, there is life for the society as a whole. Just as when that person took the life, it is harming the society as a whole. It's like taking the life of the society as a whole. So Islam applies that law, continues to apply the law, and it does serve as a deterrent. Also, the argument which is commonly used in the West, which is part of the argument for the UN's taking the position that capital punishment is unfair or whatever and canceling it, is that capital punishment does not stop people from doing crimes of passion. Meaning a person who kills somebody because they just got so angry, capital punishment will not stop them. But from the Muslim perspective, yes, it's true, it will not stop them. But the others who are planning and plotting, knowing that there is a consequence of possible death, will cause them to stop and think. When they know there's no death consequence, it will embolden them to go ahead and plot and plan and kill. Yeah. And the implementation of Islamic law in states like the Sudan, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere, in those cases, the crime has dropped drastically. It's been proven effective. As to theft, cutting off the hands, and there's a website on the internet dedicated to the hand. You know, there's a website on the internet dedicated to the hand. You go there, it talks about the wonders of the hand. You know, how God made it in such a way that the muscles work this and that, and it's able to do this, and, you know, and the thumb and the fingers, and how you're able to grasp things, how this separates us from the apes, because the apes don't have a thumb, right? They don't have opposing thumb. Their thumb is like a regular finger, huh? So that's why they're not able to hold on to things like we are. And, you know, all of these things, they're showing how wonderful the hand is. And after showing all of this from a scientific point of view, and they put in the line in the bottom, and Muslims chop it off. Right? So this is a kind of attack, you know, on Muslims, right? After showing how God has made this wonderful instrument, the hand, they say, and Muslims chop it off. Right? Well, we say, one, that the hand is not cut off just for anything, any act of theft. If the value is not above that which has been set in the society by the Sharia, which may vary from society to society. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was according to the value of a shield. The value of a shield. If a person steals what is less than that, the hand is not cut off. If a person steals something which was left out in the open, you're making wudu and you left your watch back, and somebody was, you know, attracted and took it, they're not going to cut your hand off, no matter how expensive that watch is. Because there was temptation there. Something drops from your pocket, somebody takes it. Temptation. People leave any property in other than the place where it is normally kept, it becomes a form of temptation. If somebody steals it, it's not cut. Their hand is not cut. It is for the pickpocket, the person who has trained to steal, because you're not a pickpocket by accident. You have to train yourself. You have to practice. You're not a bank robber by accident. You plot, you plan, you get the explosives, you drill the drills, you know, all these different things that you have to do it. So people who are breaking into houses, you know, knocking over banks and all these kind of things, these are professional thieves. These are the people who lose their hands. Similarly, if you take something which is a part of public property, you know, in a masjid, you steal something from a masjid or from a bus, you know, or any place that is owned not by an individual but by the state. Your hand is not cut off for it. Why? Because since it is public property, you own a part of it. So they will not cut your hand. No, they'll punish you. You may get a lash, you may be put in prison, but they'll not cut your hand off. Also, if you stole from your boss who didn't pay you your wages, right, then they will not cut your hand off, as long as you didn't steal more than what was due to you. You know, if you just went and wiped him out, took all his money and ran, then that's another situation. Right? But if you only stole what was equivalent to or less than your wages, what was due to you, which he did not give, then they will not cut your hand off. In fact, they would deal with your boss. You know, admonish him for not paying you your wages. The other point to note is that when the cutting off of hands is described commonly in the media, they use terminology like hacking off of hands, chopping off of hands. So it implies that you're getting a meat cleaver, you know, or a hacksaw, you know, that you're going to saw. So they put it in the most ugliest of terms. So naturally, when you're explaining it, you know, it's better to use more clinical terms like amputation, you know, amputating, you know, hands. So you don't conjure up in people's minds those other images when you use terms like chopping and hacking. The other area of stoning to death, this is an area too which requires some explanation, because Western society today has done what? They have basically decriminalized adultery. So naturally, if adultery is no longer a crime, the idea that there is a society that stones people to death for adultery, this seems very, primitive. They say, medieval. They have different names for it, savage. Though it is in the holy book, the Holy Bible. Stoning to death is in the Bible. It was part of the commandments. So Muslims didn't invent it. It was already there. However, because of the change in mores, people's morality has changed, where it is now okay even for the president, to be engaged in adultery, and people are just smiling, We're not going to punish him. Why should we punish him? He's only doing what the rest of us are doing, So attitudes have changed. So naturally, they're going to be shocked at this. But we have to explain to them that really, the reason why Islam has made such a severe punishment is because of its over concern about the family. That anything which would threaten the family structure, which is the foundation of the society, that it is very harsh in dealing with it. Because once you destroy the family, you destroy your society. Corruption becomes the norm. Yes, you may advance technologically, but internally, morality is gone. Your society is crumbling before your eyes. So Islam takes a strong position, but it requires 4 just, known, honest witnesses. So now, what are we talking about? What is the likelihood of 4, reliable people in the society witnessing somebody in this act? In a Muslim society, virtually 0. In a non-Muslim society, that's another case, right? In another, if you visit America and you go down to the park with your family and you hear the leaves rustling behind you, don't turn around and look, because you may be surprised to find, anything going on in public places, right? So they have a different morality, right? But in a Muslim society, it's inconceivable. Completely inconceivable. In the West, with alcohol, anything is possible. There was a case about 3 years ago where on the plane flying from New York to London, a man in first class got on there, married man, sitting beside a woman, also married, in first class. They get chatting, drinking, they get drunk, and next thing you know, they're starting to have sexual relations. The people in the other people in first class, they call the stewardess to stop these people. Stewardess is trying to stop, they continued. When the plane landed, of course, they were arrested. This was a married couple. 2 of them were married. They had the white woman had her own husband. But under the influence of alcohol, their sense of morality dropped. So they engaged publicly in this act. So these things can happen. In Muslim society where alcohol and intoxicants are banned, then the likelihood of this kind of thing happening is very, very rare. So the punishment for adultery remains as a threat. It is a deterrent to discourage people from adultery. And practically speaking, it has been effective. The other accusation which is raised or leveled at Muslims is that of homophobia. Homophobia meaning a dislike, a hatred for homosexuals. Now, of course, this is from a society which has now accepted homosexuality as a norm. In the West, Western civilization, years ago, back in the 60s, if one were to ask the average American or Brit or Frenchman, what are your views on homosexuality? They would say, this is not good. It's corrupt, sick, nasty, you know. If they were religious, particularly, they would say, it's an abomination unto the Lord, as mentioned in the Old Testament. But by the 70s, if you ask the average American, Brit or Frenchman, they had a different answer. They were now saying, no, it's alternative lifestyles. You know, freedom of choice, you know, people choose whatever they want to do, you know, different strokes for different folks. They have all kinds of statements to explain, you know, that it's okay, you know. I may not personally do it myself, but if a person wants to choose that, they're free to choose whichever state or relationship they want. As long as they're not harming anybody, that's the whole thing. As long as they're not harming anybody, why not? What's the problem? So what happened is that back in the 50s and the 60s, the psychiatrists considered homosexuality to be a mental illness. So it was in there, in the book of the American Psychiatric Association, it was listed as an illness with treatments. We had drug treatments, you had electric shock treatments, you had a variety of treatments which were used to cure people's homosexuality. But by the 70s, when the whole point of view changed, what happened is that it was removed from the main textbook for psychiatry, and it was replaced by homophobia. So now, the one who is sick, who needs to go to the psychiatrist and to have his brain examined, that is us. You know, those who despise and hate homosexuality. So this is one of the accusations leveled at us, of we are intolerant, you know, we can't tolerate other people's choices, etc. You know, we're violent towards these people. Well, we say that homosexuality is a deviation. It is corrupt, no different from pedophilia or any of the other corruptions. We don't make these distinctions. What is against the norm, what God has prescribed as deviant, in need of punishment, etc., then that's what we stand by. And we're not going to change our position based on the pressure of certain elements of society. Protestants have submitted, they've bowed down. Now they have, you know, homosexual churches with homosexual priests and ministers and all this kind of stuff. From the Muslim perspective, no, we don't have any room for that. We'll never accept a homosexual imam, you know, or homosexual community. And of course, the arguments, sometimes we're confronted with the arguments of the homosexuals that this is medical, it's biological, it's genetic, you know, all kinds of arguments that they've brought up. In the notes, I have gone through the major arguments and shown them to be false. But in any case, the bottom line for us as Muslims, even if they show any medical link, biological link between homosexuality and some biological state or organ or whatever, all we can say is that the fact that people have this inclination doesn't mean they have to fulfill their desire. Because we're not robots. People can have all kinds of inclination. You can be inclined to want to murder somebody. Does that mean, okay, because I have inclination, I can go and murder them? That's my excuse. I had an inclination? No. So, having an inclination is just a test, as we look at it. All of us may experience at some time in our lives the desire to want to do something which is not good. We are tested by those desires, and we have been given brains minds where we control ourselves. We're not like animals. Animals who don't have a sense of restraint, no consciousness. When a lion sees a deer running by, he doesn't stop and think, should I eat that deer or should I not? The deer looks pregnant. Maybe I should let the deer have babies first, feed those babies before I go and kill him and eat him. No. Or kill her and eat her. No, no. The lion is hungry, he feels the desire, he sees the deer, he goes, kills the deer and eats the deer. That is the animal kingdom. But we as human beings, we do have minds. We have, intelligence to be able to judge things. Judge when it is appropriate to do certain things and when it is not. So we are not robots. We are not animals. Though, yeah, we may share characteristics with animals. We do have free will, the ability to choose to do or not do. The other major issue which comes up is that of the law of apostasy. That a person leaves Islam and the law says, Sharia says, we can execute that person. People say, what kind of religion is this? People are forced to remain in it. If you leave it, you're killed. Well, we explain it from the perspective of treason. That one, Islam is not a personal, individual thing. It is the law for the society as a whole. Muslim society is governed by Islam. All aspects of that society are governed by the laws of Islam. So there's no separation between the individual's beliefs and the society's laws. They're all intertwined, they're all interrelated. So when a person openly declares his apostasy or her apostasy, they don't believe openly, it is a challenge against the society. It threatens the very society's existence. And that is why the punishment is so severe. If the person chooses to not be a Muslim, leave Islam, quietly leaves the country, then Islam does not permit or instruct its members to send death squads after that person to go kill them. No. This hunting down of Rushdie and all this kind of stuff, this is not from Islam. But within the Muslim community, the Muslim state, that person who openly declares their disbelief, it is looked at as a threat for the weaker members of the society who are conforming with Islam because the law is there. If they see others apostate, leave Islam, it may encourage them in their weakness to join them. So in order to protect the weaker members, Islam deals with that individual strongly. But he is given a chance to repent. When a person, for example, from the other states, gives away state secrets to who the state considers to be their enemy. This is materials. You've given away secret information. Then your life is taken for those materials. In Islamic law, your life will not be taken for materials. But they will take your life over material things. And if you repent, if you say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it, I won't do it again, too late. You die anyway. See? So even from the Islamic perspective, repentance is acceptable and it will excuse the person from execution. And furthermore, it is over something which is far more critical than the material things of this life. It is about the spiritual existence of the community. So the most effective way, as I said, of dealing with this issue is to compare it to the treason laws. And what you find is that in the UK, for example, the death penalty, though it was abolished from back in the 50s, they retained it in the case of piracy and treason. And all the way up until 1971, if you set fire to the Queen's ships and her dockyards, you would be executed. That was the law. So this principle of treason, protecting the society from the harm of the individual, this is not something new. It has been around in all societies. So the penalty, this death penalty for apostasy, this is for one who openly threatens the state. And you should note that this was instituted first when? In Medina, when the Jews, in order to try to shake the faith of the believers, would accept Islam in the morning, and then by the afternoon they would leave Islam, they would apostate. They were playing with Islam to try to shake the faith of the new converts to Islam. So the law came. So it was initially to deal with them, and then it remained to deal with other situations. But the law came basically telling them, if you come into Islam, you better be for real. You play with Islam, you suffer the consequence. Right? So that was the origin of the death penalty for apostasy. And as to the verse which states, La ikraha fid din, there's no compulsion in religion, people may ask, well then, where does this fit in? There is no compulsion to join the religion. No compulsion to join the religion. But once you're in, you're supposed to be in for good. The last point, there's also a point here on music. We know Prophet ﷺ had said there will be a period when the people of my nation will legalize fornication, the wearing of silk, drinking wine, and the use of musical instruments. And he also said, some of the people of my nation will drink wine, calling it by another name. Merriment will be made for them by the playing of musical instruments and the singing of adult female singers. So on the basis of these two hadiths and others, Islam took the position that musical instruments and what it produces, the music, is prohibited. The only exception made was for the use of the duff, a kind of drum, and the human voice, with the exception of adult females singing before males. But small girls, it's okay, and males and young boys, it's also okay to sing and beat the duff on occasions of merriment, etc. Now, some may ask, why? Why? Human nature loves music. That's why Islam did not prohibit it altogether. The mother singing her child to sleep, it's natural. We have that inclination towards it. However, it has an evil element to it. And that is why it was restricted in Islam. Now, some would ask, well, what is that evil? All we can see is that it's good, it's pleasurable, it makes us feel comfortable. You know, if you're down, it makes you feel in a good mood and all these other kinds of things. You know, music is enjoyable. Ultimately, it's good. Well, we say, if it were good, really, then the musicians would be the best in society. The musicians, those who make music, would be the best elements of society. Is that the case? Are the musicians the best elements of society? No. They are some of the worst, the most corrupt, involved in drugs and suicide and all this kind of thing happen to them. Why? If music is so good, why isn't it making them good? Producing good in them? No. Instead, we find corruption. So this is telling us that there's something there. And the reality is that music has an ability to encapture the heart. to captivate the heart, to create an addiction very easily, very quickly. This is why, for example, if you used to listen to music when you were young, whatever, you gave it up, whatever, till now, then you hear 2 bars from a song you knew when you were 7 years old or 8 years old. The whole song comes back in your head. Words, the whole thing. Why is that? When you try to remember a surah you memorized a month ago, you're struggling. But that tune from 10 years ago, it's in your head in an instant. This is telling you something. It has an effect on the psyche. It has a subliminal effect, so that it can change people without them realizing it. Change their habits, their morals, etc. It can do that. When you look at many of the heinous crimes committed by youth today in Western societies, you find that it's related to the music that they're listening to. It is related to the music that they're listening to. And music has a subtle way of affecting us. You don't even realize it. You think, okay, no, I'm hearing it, doesn't affect me. I'm praying 5 times a day, I'm fasting, I'm doing all the things, but I listen to music. It helps me study. You know, some students tell me that I can't study without listening to music, you know. When I listen to music, it calms me down and makes studying easy for me. Yeah, because you're addicted. This is the nature of the addict. You know, like the person who smokes cigarettes, it says it calms me down, you know. But how did you become an addict? How did you learn to smoke cigarettes? You think you could take a cigarette and take a full breath, you know, take a deep breath the first time you ever smoked a cigarette? You ever tried that? Pick up a cigarette and go, what would happen to you? Huh? You would be coughing. You'd be like this. You couldn't do it. You have to train yourself. What happens is that you take little bit, till you destroy the natural reaction of your body to this foreign element which is harmful to it. You have to destroy it in your lungs before you can now go, that tastes good like a Marlboro should, right? No, this is, you know that the Marlboro man died of cancer also, right? Marlboro man who used to be in the ads riding off into the sunset, right? On his horse with his cowboy hat and his cowboy boots. He died of cancer. And his family is suing the Marlboro cigarette company for killing him. Anyway, the point is that this is the nature of music, that it reaches into your psyche, it touches you and affects you without you even realizing it. So, even if we are not able to put our finger exactly where the harm is, know that if Allah has prohibited it, it is harmful. One of the questions one of the brothers wanted to ask before was, why did Allah prohibit certain foods and allow certain other foods? He prohibited those foods because they're harmful. He prohibited those foods because they're harmful. Some of the foods and things that He prohibited, we can see the harm very easily. Alcohol, very clear. But other ones, it's not so clear. Other prohibited things are not so clear. Pork. Well, some people may argue about pork, you know, but is it really clear? What's the difference between pork and beef? The line is very fine. And that's why the difference between alcohol and wine and juice, you know, fruit juice, is very fine also. The difference between trade and interest is very fine. And that's what the people in the past said. But interest is just like trade. The reality is that every prohibited thing has a permitted version. Everything which has been prohibited to us has a permitted version. In fact, many permitted versions. The basic image of the garden, Adam and Eve in the garden, one tree prohibited. All of the other trees of the garden they can eat from. One prohibited tree. That is halal and haram. People like to say, you Muslims, everything is haram for you. They say this, everything is haram. You can't do anything. Any good, any enjoyable thing you want to do is haram. We hear young people saying that too. Muslims even saying that. But the reality is that's not true at all. The vast majority of things are halal. The haram is actually very few. Very few. But what happens is Satan comes to us and makes the haram so attractive, we feel our lives are incomplete unless we take that haram. This is where real enjoyment is, in the haram. And this is from Satan. And that's exactly what happened to Adam, wasn't it? Satan came to him and told him, this is the tree you really need to eat. Right? God gave him all the other trees, but no, this is the one that you need to eat from. If you want to be eternal, you want to be like the angels, eat from the tree. So that is the nature of the haram. That Satan has made it attractive. The media supporting Satan has made the forbidden things attractive. So now when you look around, all the enjoyable things you want to do, you say they're all forbidden. But no, actually, there is so much in halal, in the permissible, but we just can't see it anymore. The last issue, last two issues are interrelated: terrorism and jihad. One, Muslims are accused of being terrorists. We should point out that, in general, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. It's relative. In many cases, it's relative. If you use the definition used by America for terrorism, terrorism is defined by the American government as the threat or use of violence to advance a political cause by individuals or groups, whether acting for or in opposition to established governmental authority, when such actions are intended to stun, shock, or intimidate a target group wider than the immediate victims. That is the definition, according to American government, of terrorism. That describes the American War of Independence, the French Revolution, all of your major, wars of liberation, etc., can be described by the same thing. And that's why when America tried to get the UN to agree on a definition of terrorism, they couldn't. Countries couldn't agree. Till now, they have not agreed on the definition of terrorism, because it's a two-edged sword. Now, there are some acts which Muslims would agree are terroristic. Killing innocent women and children, we'll say this is terroristic. This is to strike terror in the hearts of the people. It doesn't achieve any military goal. We as Muslims fighting in jihad, we are limited to fighting according to the laws that Islam has set. We can't just do anything. Those people killed your parents, you can go kill their parents? No, that's not an eye for an eye. If they killed your parents, you can kill them. If they killed your children, you can kill them. You can't kill their children. This is law. This is Sharia. We're not free to do anything in the name of jihad or defense of Muslims, etc. But unfortunately, the media, whenever Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.